Sustainability nonprofit curriculum, using a policy that my students often use. Over the weekend when I was working on my presentation, I waited that long, I kept putting myself to sleep. And figuring out what would work for you, I changed the title to World Saving 2.0. For a good reason. I'm only going to concentrate on or focus on one thing here, the social leg of the triple bottom line. And the way I've developed a program to have students go out in the community and become engaged. And there's plenty of statistics to show that once students get engaged, they tend to stay engaged throughout their life. If they don't do it at a young age, we are probably going to lose them. So the world continues to face lots of problems. We have some old ones, some new ones, but climate change, economic problems, we still have wars, and certainly have social issues. So in sustainability, we attack some of these things. It's this new paradigm that goes beyond this satisficing kind of decision-making and looks beyond the bottom line at various other things. So my talk's going to be focused on community service as one way to build social capital and as part of a curriculum. And through that, we can foster more social growth. And since I am part political scientist, I get really geeked about the history and procedural elements that we have in politics that actually fill into this thing. So you're going to hear a little bit of that too. Okay. In the past, solving problems was pretty easy. Back in this guy's days, maybe keeping warm, hunting, communities developed, civilizations developed in the long run. People learned to work together because they had common purpose or common needs. Later on, we learned how to use things like this to solve problems. We had a number of things going on. Force could be used to create economic change, might or brute force of war, or even position power, where we have the sheriff come into town and straighten things out. And I couldn't find a picture of a sheriff, but I thought Yosemite would work really well. And possibly in another universe, another dimension, we also had superheroes who would come and change things. We know that we can't do that. We can't rely on Spider-Man or Superman or anybody like that. And today, unlike the cavemen, and unfortunately we still have wars, but we have become more civilized, much more democratic, and we seek more civilized ways or tools for problem solving. So let me give you a little history first. This is the political science part. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French aristocrat who came to the United States in 1830 to study our experiment in democracy. One of the things he found, and he really marveled at it, was this idea of association. That virtually everything Americans did required working together, getting things done as a group rather than as a single person. And he would tell you that in Europe at that time, aristocrats did that sort of thing. If there was a problem, if there was a need in the community, the aristocrat was contacted, and he or she, probably a he, would have come in and straightened things out in a way. And as a matter of fact, he was an aristocrat. He had time to travel all over the world in the 1800s. But he did marvel at this idea of association and the fact that in the United States, we used association to accomplish everything, from building schools and seminaries to libraries and even towns and communities. Another chunk of the history or the process is the idea that we continue to need groups or associations to affect public policy. And thanks to these guys, that's their most recent picture too. These guys were really smart. They were very afraid of tyranny, very afraid of having another monarch come in and rule rather than having a democracy or say in what they had to do. And what they did, or what they were really concerned about, was factions, or another way of saying association. And they were concerned that faction, or a faction, could come along and take over, kind of take over the government and start pushing their own agenda rather than one that's for the public. And they were very concerned about that. Federalist 51, James Madison talks about it, if you're interested. So what did they do? They recognized that first people wanted to create wealth and wanted to do their own thing, and that indeed that could lead to factions. So what they did was create a capitalist economy with a political system that encouraged factions. They actually created a system that created more factions. And the reason I'm talking about this is how people get involved. Everyone in this room could get involved in something. You might get involved with government or a nonprofit because you're interested or you've had some sort of negative thing happen to you. They developed this method for us to do. So we all work together. This is one of those old Amish barn raising pictures. I thought it was nice. Really don't know why it's there. Okay, so I teach at Aquinas College. I teach, and I love to call them this, I teach the world savers. I go out and look for world savers. These young people who honestly want to make a difference. And I try to show them that they can make a difference. For instance, a couple years ago, I had a young lady come in to my office. She was interested in the program, and I said, "What do you want to do in 5 years after you're out of college?" She says, and she was dead serious, "I want to save the world." You know, how can you turn that down? Unfortunately, none of us are going to save the world, right? But we can change the world. And I try to get my students to understand they're not going to save, but they can change. We can change the world just by smiling more, maybe, or getting into sustainability or environmental issues a little bit more. But it starts with the individual. So the last 4 years here, I've been working with these groups through the program. And it's really a public administration, nonprofit management program, with the stress on sustainability. Aquinas is one of the leaders in sustainability in this area, one of the first schools in the United States to have a sustainability degree. But what I do is, in the initial stages, this is the wrong way to say it, I force students to volunteer. I've never figured out a good way to say that. Because, and some of you know this, you're reluctant to go out and do things. But what I found is, once they're out and doing things, they get really excited. And I always try to put them someplace that I think they'll be happy. So I've had a ballet instructor, ESL instructors. I have one right now working on a campaign, working at food banks and that sort of thing. I try to get them involved, try to get them excited about doing community service. And at the end of the program, well, I continue to encourage them all throughout, but at the end of the program, I'm asking them to go into an organization for 2 terms. First term, they work a general internship. They just learn a number of things. Second term, they come back as a consultant, okay? They're ready to graduate. We've given them lots of information, lots of experience. They're ready to go. And they identify some need in the community or in that organization and put it to work. Those of you who may know the food basket, Kids Food Basket here in Grand Rapids, started as a Grand Valley project. Today they're feeding 3,200 kids 6 days a week, sack lunches. So some of them really do well. Okay, I think this is the future we'd want to see. At work and play, I think, work's a 4-letter word, but it doesn't have to have that kind of connotation. I think we have to have fun, we have to understand what we're doing, and maybe be a little less materialistic or greedy. So if we can teach the competencies and that all these problems can't be solved at one time, and learn how to synthesize. when Betty was talking, I was hearing all these other terms coming in, and the idea of taking multiple viewpoints and solve problems. So we can't solve them in these silos. So the future's coming up. What do we do? My job now is to continue what I've been doing, but how do I do that? So the things I'm interested in doing is continuing community service, a focus on that, as a way of building social capital. Those students, as they leave, will go out and build their own social capital. And what kind of challenges do we have? How do we incorporate community service into other curriculums, like biology? That might be a little easier than mathematics, or philosophy, or theater. How do we increase that, all that kind of stuff? And continue to encourage students to engage in their communities. That's the most important thing. And in terms of sustainability, that's the thing I'm working on, social capital.